Welcome to the Boone Podcast. I'm Bret Boone, and today on the program, I sit down with an all-star and a World Series champion.
I sacrificed a lot to come to New York. I wanted to be a part of something special.
He made me a better player, a better person.
Roy Halladay is my guy, man. He was tough.
All right, welcome everybody to the Bret Boone Podcast. I'm Rich Herrera from the Infinity Sports Network, sitting in for Bret today as he's trying to figure out what he's going to do next year. We don't want to get him in trouble with anybody, just in case somebody wants to hire him as a manager. So I'm going to sit in for him today as the co-creator and executive producer and then a host over at Infinity. Hey, we're joined right now by Steve Phillips, MLB Network Radio, longtime Major League Baseball executive. Steve, thanks so much for joining us on the podcast today.
Yeah, happy to do it. Thanks for having me.
Okay, let me just right off the get-go. I got to ask you this question. Bret and I talk about aircraft carriers, right? The guy that could carry a team, makes everybody else around them better, protects everybody in the lineup. They're just the difference maker. For you, right now, left in the four teams of the playoffs, who's the one true aircraft carrier?
Well, I think that Ohtani is that guy. He's not playing all that well right now, but Ohtani is certainly that guy. I think Cal Raleigh is that guy for Seattle. And, I think Freddie Freeman can still be that guy and put a team on his shoulder. We saw him do it last year in the World Series, limping around the bases and producing that way. And Vladimir Guerrero Jr. should be that guy, but he's not quite there right now. And so, these teams have, candidates for that. Milwaukee does. I mean, Yelich, I love Yelich, but he's not really the aircraft carrier anymore. And they do it a little bit differently. But you've got some strong candidates on these, semifinal teams.
What's the difference between the man, like we said, the aircraft carrier, and then these little guys that just kind of show up? Steve, every World Series, there's some unsung hero. The Francisco Carreras of the world that just come out of nowhere that have that one moment in the sun, Marco Scudero, those guys that are those difference makers. I mean, you have to have that combination of both, right?
You do. And I think that, it's interesting that a lot of times we'll see in the World Series and in the playoffs that it is one of the complementary players, the Steve Pearces of the world who step up and produce. And I think part of it is, as a team, you advance scout, you spend so much time scouting and game planning. What are you going to do with the aircraft carrier? What are you going to do with the horses? What are you going to do with those guys at the front of the lineup? Then you spend a little less time on everybody else down the list. And there's a little less pressure on those guys to have to produce. You put a little less into your thought necessarily about how to attack them, right or wrong. I think you do. And you let up a little bit when you face, Tommy Edman, when you're not facing Ohtani and those guys. And guys like that can come through in the clutch. And, the Blue Jays have done that all season long this year. Seattle's got some of those guys down the list right now that are producing for them. And listen, the last five hitters in the Dodgers lineup went 8 for 18 with 4 runs scored and 4 RBIs in game 2 of their series with the Brewers. And the Brewers are made up of a collection of those other guys and are finding a way to win, even producing that way.
When you're sitting up in the executive suite, how much does that drive you crazy when an 8 or 9 guy gets that crooked number across? You're like, okay, listen, bases loaded, we give up 1. That's fine. Number 8 hitter hits one in the corner, rattles around over there. You're like, come on, guy. What are you guys doing?
Yeah, I think that it's frustrating. It is, listen, as an executive, it is so painful when your team's in the playoffs. I know that people think, oh, you got to be no, it's literally physical pain to watch the games, because when you're hitting, you're like, okay, well, at least I can breathe a little bit. When you're pitching it in the field, something's going to go wrong. And if the closer the game, the more stress you feel. Tie games, and you're on the road in extra innings, that it's sort of do or die every time they go out there. It literally is physical pain. There's no enjoyment in it when you're an executive with your team in the playoffs until afterwards, where you can kind of look back and reflect at some of the good times. But boy, it's the stress level is intense.
I don't think people understand the stress level of the executive. The president of baseball operations, general manager, was a title that you had. Bret talks about the stress of watching his guys hit. He says, you feel like a dad for these guys. I worked in Oakland during Moneyball, and, it's kind of famously known around baseball that Billy Beane would go put on the bullpen coach's uniform, his workout gear, and he'd go work out like a madman. And I'd see him 2 outs in the ninth inning and go down to do the post-game interview. Here comes Billy coming out of the exercise room. He's just dripping with sweat. He couldn't sit and watch the game. Jerry West, the longtime executive in the NBA, if you were wanting to meet Jerry West, go stand in the concourse because he's walking the concourse. He couldn't stand to watch the Lakers. I've been with Andrew Friedman in his box. Andrew, you've met Andrew, the most mild-mannered, nicest, quiet guy. I don't want to be near him during a game. Describe to the fans what it's like for a general manager and just that I don't even know how to describe it. It's not rage, but intensity. There's nothing you could do but watch what you put on the field.
Yeah, it's the part of, like, you can't hit and pitch, field the ball for them, and you're not making every decision, despite, and in this era, certainly there's more input than when I was general manager. I thought that it's not, I can't hold the manager accountable for his decision making and then tell him what to do. Like, that didn't seem right. I mean, if he's going to have the responsibility, he needed to have the authority to make decisions about what he wanted to do. Now, you can share information with him, but in the end, and I always looked at it, thought, hey, what were you thinking there? He's like, I thought this. Like, all right, you had a very reasonable explanation. I'm not going to be harsh about that. But yeah, it's so hard because, our way of competing as an executive is make trades, add talent, sign contracts, bring people in, hold people accountable, ask questions, be the devil's advocate in meetings. Well, I know we're doing this, but why can't we do that? And just try to challenge people to give more. But in the end, when they go out there and play, you're like the fans sitting and watching, and it is a significant stress level because you do have responsibility, you do have authority, but you're not the one executing the plan, and it's hard to do that and deal with it.
The relationship now between the general manager, the front office, and the manager has never been closer in baseball. It's different than when you were a general manager and you work with Jim Duquette over at MLB Network Radio, and Jim Bowden's a good friend of this podcast. The relationships you had with your manager, I think, is completely different than what we see with Uncle Aaron, with Aaron Boone, and Brian Cashman. Talk to us about the relationship and how these two have to be able to work together, even more so now with the analytics, the partnership, and how the rosters are constructed.
Yeah, so my relationship with my manager is different than today, but it was even different than back then. I mean, Bobby Valentin and I clashed a lot, and he was a big personality. It's part of what made him great, but it was also part of what got him in trouble every couple of weeks. And so you didn't want to put a bushel over his light, but you needed to have some boundaries to be able to manage it because of dealing with players and stuff. And so we did clash a lot in back then. And I'm from the era where it was Brian Cashman and Joe Torre. They were in lockstep. It was John Schuerholz and Bobby Cox. And you start going through Theo and Terry Francona until there was a rub there at some point too. And look, it's the relationship is structured in a way that there's going to be some challenges because the manager is told win today, win now. And as a general manager, you're told win now, but also win next year, the next year, the next year, the next year. And so the decisions that a general manager might need to make are sometimes different than the manager's, thought process of winning now. And there's got to be some ability to understand each side's motivations and challenges with it. And in the end, the manager needs to know that the general manager is the boss. And ultimately, you kind of go along with the plan, have input, and everybody should. But ultimately, the general manager kind of gets to control these player personnel type things for the team. Once they're in the clubhouse, the manager can decide what to do. And I know there's suggestions about lineups and matchups and that sort of thing. That should just be information. And then the manager has to be able to, I think, digest that and use his gut as well.
Go back to when you first broke into the game, a young kid wanting to work in the front office. The relationships were even different back then because you had these bigger than life managers. You had the Sparkies, you had the Lou Pinellas, you had the Billy Martins, these bigger than life managers. We don't have that in the game anymore. So we've even seen in your lifetime how the manager would kind of be the face of the franchise, and they were never to be questioned. And then we see where we are today, where it's almost a complete 180.
Yeah, it's changed. I mean, I think that the way the game is covered in the media with social media has changed, somewhat the needs for the manager. And, so many times I've asked managers, so tell me something about the job that you didn't anticipate going into it. And almost inevitably, they all say, I didn't realize how much of it was not about managing the game. And it was about all of the other stuff. And that other stuff is managing the strength and development people, managing the medical stuff, being the spokesperson for the organization. It's doing interviews. It's being part of the planning. It's a year-round job now. It's not just a seasonal job where at the end you go home, you come back and you strap it on and go play. That they're having to deal with analytics and how do you manage that with the players. And so there's, so much has changed about it. And so you've seen, less the superstar player coming in, although it'd be exciting to see Albert Pujols get a managing job, and more about, well-rounded, diverse, people that can handle all different areas and now digest information that is so different than before, that it's less about what your eyes are saying to you than what, analytics are telling you and spin rates and those sorts of things. So it's the game's changed a lot. And look, the reality is you have to adapt to it or you're out. And that's the reality of what we're living in.
All right, let's play this little fantasy game out of my head. I just won the lottery. I just won $50 billion. I can buy whatever team I want. I'm going to go buy my old team, the Tampa Bay Rays. I'm going to hire you to be the general manager. What would you look for in a skipper? Because there's teams that are doing that right now. What would be Steve Phillips' idea skipper?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So I did interview managers. I interviewed Terry Francona, and I loved him, and this was after he was fired in Philadelphia. Mm-hmm. And then a few years after we interviewed him, he ended up getting the Red Sox job. And I thought, I don't know that I can tell his story or sell his story in New York, because in New York, I had to have a reason that was acceptable. Joe Torre got hired and it said Clueless Joe on the back page of the Daily News,
right,
or the Post. And yet he turned out to be a Hall of Fame manager. And so that judgment of that, I thought, I can't take the failed Phillies manager, bring him in. People can say, what the heck you doing? Even though I thought, man, this guy is really good. And so I think that Tampa Bay, you've got new ownership. You need somebody adaptable, although Kevin Cash would be, if I had to interview somebody, I'll take Kevin Cash in a heartbeat.
Right.
But for a new candidate, I think that a lot depends upon the market and the expectations. Are we a win now team, or are we, bringing up young players and building? If it's a younger team, then a development manager, because you're going to develop players. So much of that is happening at the big league level right now. So somebody with that development background would be important to me. Communication skills, obviously important to me. I think getting along with each other in a friendship, then a connection, that can be part of it. I think the people who impacted them in their careers, I think, is important to understand where they've filled those voids in how they're going to go out and manage. But I think it's that ability to deal with all kinds of people. And so I would have that manager candidate in this era meet with the owner, meet with the business side, meet with the analytics side, meet with the social media side, meet with the stadium operations side, and get feedback, because all of the things that managers don't really understand that is part of the job, I kind of want them to get a feel, and for my people to get a feel for how that manager would fit in all of those things that he has to do other than managing a team. And so I'd go out to dinner with the candidate, because I think the way that they interact with hostesses and hosts and waiters and waitresses and bartenders is really important. Like, I think it may just be you catch somebody in a natural, authentic state, and if they're not representing the organization in the way that I would want, if they're rude to a waiter, like, that doesn't work for me. That's not somebody I want working for. So I want to know that about the person.
That Warren Buffett does that.
Yeah. What's that?
That's straight out of Warren Buffett's playbook. He takes people to breakfast and he makes sure that there's a mistake to see how he handles the situation.
Absolutely. And I think that and so I think that but I've interviewed candidates, and I remember asking Willie Randolph, what's the oddest question you got asked in an interview? And he said, if you were a tree, what kind of tree would you be? And I'm like, who would ask that? Like, I would not ask that. I don't know. I mean, it would not be a question on my list of questions to ask a managerial candidate. And he said, I said, what did you answer? I'm kind of dying to know now. And he said, oh, like an oak tree, big, strong, and everything else. I said, I might have said palm tree because, you have to sway in the wind and you survive storms and you sort of bend a little bit here and there. But I don't know that there's an answer to that one.
I'd be an ash, so I can do everything we can to get that one extra knock.
Okay, I like that. Oh, I like that. Very, very good. And I like dad jokes too, so that's really important to me. So I'm in on that answer. And so, but I will tell you that so many, and what I've done with a lot of managerial candidates is I've sat with guys for hours, sharing with them what a general manager is looking for. When I ask you this is what I'm wondering, because I don't think they always understand what it is that the general manager needs to satisfy in himself to make the decision that you're the guy. And even, it was interesting. I interviewed Willie Randolph back then, and he'd played for the Mets, played for the Yankees, had coached with Joe Torre, won a bunch of championships, played for the Mets, and he was on paper such a great candidate. But when I interviewed him, I thought, and he interviewed 10 times, and at the end of it, I said to him, "Has anybody given you feedback before?" And he said, "No, not really." And I said, "Well, I want to give you some feedback." I said, "Because I think you can do this job, but I said, when I ask you, what would you do in this situation or that situation, it wouldn't, and I'm not doing it in a way to badmouth my former manager. I'm trying to figure out, how would you handle these situations to do it? And I want to know that you've thought about it before. So how would you prepare your team in spring training? Do you want the position players to play half the game and get out, or do you want them to start to play full games? How do you want?" And he goes, "Well, I'd find out what you did before and sort of work off that." I'm like, "Well, what we did before, we ended up in fourth place. I want it." And so I said to him, I said, I need you to help me tell a story that I'm hiring you because of this, 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 and this. I can make up that story that you're Willie Randolph, played for both teams. I said, but I need to know that. And so I went and I gave another crack at it. It was much better. And ultimately it led to him getting a managerial job. But I don't think that the candidates always really know what it is that a general manager or president of baseball operation needs in order to make the decision to choose them.
How much of it is a CYA? Because again, you're putting your name on it. Steve Phillips says, "I'm hiring Joe Schmo." He doesn't work out. They're going to remember that you're the one who brought him into the organization.
Yeah, I didn't think that way. And I don't think the general managers think that way. I think they look at it and think, who's the guy that's best for us? And among the candidates that are out there, and understanding that you're doing it, that you're hired to be fired in these jobs. But I think you do it with the full intent that you're picking the winner. Not that it's going to save me, but or that if it doesn't work, that I'm out. And we know coaches are the buffer for the manager. The manager's the buffer for the general manager for all of our jobs. It kind of plays out that way. And unless you're in certain places where you can go through, 5 or 6, 7 managers and still keep, keeping the job. It's just every ownership group's different. But I think most general managers do it not to cover their rear, but to really pick that right guy.
I've never asked anybody this before, Steve, but I almost feel like I know you from all the years on TV and then on satellite radio. So I'm going to ask you something I wouldn't feel comfortable asking anybody else. How hard is it to fire somebody? Coaching staff, assistant coach, a hitting coach, a coach. What's it like?
It's awful. It's awful because you understand that you're not just firing the coach, the person, you're firing people in the organization's friends, colleagues, people that I've been friendly with, and you're firing their family. That you're affecting the lives of husbands and wives and kids, and having been fired, I understand it. And so I think Dallas Green used to say, unless you've been fired in this game, you're not anybody in this game. And And so like, I get it. And yet like, it's horrible, and I would always want to help them get something else, and be out there to support them in getting something else. It's interesting, when I was broadcasting games, I was with Steve Stone and Gary Thorne for a while at ESPN broadcasting games. And we broadcast a number of games where some of my former coaches that had been fired are now working for other teams. And Steve Stone, is as tactful as he is, would say to the coach, "Hey, didn't he fire you?" Like,
I can hear Stoney saying that too.
And I'm like, and yet the people that I had fired generally were kind and understanding and supportive and friendly. And he's like, "How is it possible you fired so many people and they all like you? Like, how is that possible that you can do it?" And I think maybe they put on a good face, but you understand that it's not personal when you do this. You're doing it to win. But I would say that if I went back and did things over again, I'm more mature now. I was young and even in my relationship with Bobby Valentine, I was immature at times, didn't handle him the right way. And when I reacted one way, he reacted way. And so we sort of played off each other a little bit in a codependent kind of a way. So, with much more awareness now, I think things would be different. And maybe I wouldn't be as aggressive with some of the hirings and firings that I did when I was general manager.
It's interesting when you talk about the relationship from afar. And again, we know Aaron personally on the podcast. It seems like Cashman, Aaron Boone is that type of relationship with their partners. I know they butt heads. They don't do it in public, but we know they butt heads. They have to. But they both understand where each other's coming from. So I thought that was an interesting description.
I will tell you, to that point, I'm living in the New York, I'm in Connecticut, I live in the New York area. I, for the life of me, don't understand the fans' response to Aaron Boone and Brian Cashman. I just don't understand it. What is the level of expectation? Like the notion that you start out every year that if you don't win a World Series, then it's a failure, just as a setup. It's such a setup that there are other good teams out there. And the additional rounds of the playoffs have made it that much more difficult for teams to repeat. Now, maybe the Dodgers will this year, but it's made it that much more difficult for teams to be able to get through it. And like people are saying, "Oh, we got to make changes." You went to the World Series last year and you tied for the best record in the American League this year. What do you want from the next manager? If I told you he takes you to the World Series and you end up with the best record, would you take that? And they're like, "Yes, I would take that." Well, you got that guy right now. And you got that general manager right now. And so, yeah, it's been tough in the playoffs for them for a while. They haven't won a World Series in 16 years. Okay, well, there are 30 teams. And, if we're evenly distributing this, you're going to win one every 30 years. Now, we're not. And I understand there's more payroll and there's more expectations. But give me the leadership group that gets me to the playoffs every year. And sooner or later, they're going to win another World Series. And these two guys can do that over and over and over again consistently as a team in New York.
And the thing is, the best team doesn't win every year. You got to have great players. You got to stay healthy. But, Steve, you've been in the game long enough. Please explain to everybody, you have to have just a little bit of magic. Something has to break your way in order to get this thing because there's too much talent.
A bloop falls in, right? And we hit a rocket right at somebody for an out. And somebody bloops one in, he gets base hit, a run scores, and we think, well, that was the better. I mean, it just happened that's the ball that fell in. I mean, this is somewhat of what baseball happens. And I really do believe, give me the team that keeps getting to the playoffs. Look, those Atlanta Braves teams back when I was general manager, and I told John Schuerholz and Bobby Cox that if I ever had to pick them out of a police lineup, I'd have to have them turned around because I only know what they looked like from behind because I chased them for all 6 years. We never were in front of them. I have no idea. But they won one World Series in those 14 years, and they were the class of baseball at that time. And now it's even harder to win because of the additional rounds built into the playoffs. And so, I've got a lot of respect for the consistency of ownership in how they maintain personnel, in understanding that just making a change for the sake of change isn't going to make it better. And if you bring in a new guy who's never done it, he's likely going to make the same mistakes on the learning scale that your previous first-time general manager went through. So why not take the experience of that growth of making mistakes and now figure out the right way to build a team?
When I was around Andrew Friedman, he talked about, we build the team for the marathon and then there's a sprint. So you got the when he was at Tampa Bay, he built those teams, just get me in and then let me get my sprinters to get to where I want to go. The Dodgers, now he has so much depth and so many resources. He's built a team that is a marathoner with a great kick, and they happen to be sprinters that can win a World Series as well.
Yeah, well, the playoffs are a completely different game than the regular season, right? The marathon of the regular season, where you truly need your 26-man roster. When you get to the playoffs, like the National League this year in the division series, they played on Monday, they were off on Tuesday. They played on Wednesday, they were off on Thursday. Then they played on Friday and Saturday, had an off day, and played on Sunday. You don't need 26 players for that. You're going to play your regular guys, and you're going to go. You could navigate through that with 3 or 4 relievers. If your starter gives you a decent game, it's a completely different animal. It is a sprint, and so teams built to win over 162 are not necessarily always teams built for the short series. And sometimes teams that don't get into the playoffs might have been better suited in the tournament format that we have, with the structure of programming and days off and how you protect it, than teams that actually do make it to the playoffs. And so, there's no perfect system. I think baseball rewards the regular season in a significant way, yet, a 3-game wild card is really a tough thing to do. And road teams can win as much as home teams can win, and better records are losing to lesser records, and it's baseball, and it's part of what makes it fascinating and part of what makes it frustrating.
All right, let's talk about the Final Four. I've got Los Angeles, I've got Seattle. They both have commanding leads as we record this podcast. Give me one reason why it's just not fait accompli that the Dodgers will take on Seattle in the World Series.
Yeah, so I think the Blue Jays are the reason why. I think it's going to be really tough for Milwaukee to come back. To get manhandled by Snell and Yamamoto, and then have to face Glasnow in Game 3 and Ohtani in Game 4, where they don't hit a lot of home runs, the Brewers. In the regular season, you can win a lot of games manufacturing, get them on, get them over, get them in. They had the 3rd highest scoring offense. But in the playoffs, with the good pitching, it takes somebody to hit the ball in the ballpark. Teams that have out-homered the opposition are 20-4 in the postseason right now. And the Dodgers have that firepower. I think it's going to be really tough on Milwaukee. I think they're just outmanned, and they've had injuries. Losing Woodruff hurt them. So I think it's going to be tough. I think that Toronto has a shot to come back. They need Shane Bieber to win in Game 3. Scherzer is going to have to be that, like the song says, I'm not as good as I once was, but I'm as good once as I ever was, and hope that he can do that. But their offense, which was so good against the Yankees, needs to get going again. If they can get early lead and build some of that and allow the starter to stay in the game deeper, to stay out of their bullpen, there's a pathway to do it. It's narrow, but there is, I think, more of a pathway for Toronto to extend the series, potentially win the series, than there is for Milwaukee.
Who's your MVP? The big dumper or Aaron Judge?
Oh, Aaron Judge. I honestly don't think it's close. I think that, right, Raleigh hit 6 more home runs, I think, than Judge, maybe 7 more. So in those 7 at-bats, he was better than Aaron Judge. But Aaron Judge hit 330, and Cal Raleigh hit 237. So the on base for Aaron Judge was, 440, and for Raleigh it was 90 points less. Judge's OPS is like 170 points better than Cal Raleigh's. And I heard it said this way, I think Brad Ausmus said it, that you take 175 points away from Judge and you get Raleigh. You take 175 points in OPS away from Raleigh and you get an average player. And so Aaron Judge edges him out in WAR, whether it's Baseball Reference or Fangraphs WAR, weighted runs created plus, OPS plus. It's not close. Win probability added. Aaron Judge blows him away in that category. And so Raleigh had an MVP caliber season, and in any other year, he should get it. though I think Judge should. Now, I think it's writers who vote. Writers like stories, and Cal Raleigh's a great story. I mean, he set the record for switch hitting home runs, set the record for catchers home runs, got to 60, which is a nice round, beautiful number. He's got a great nickname, won the home run derby at the All-Star. I mean, there's a lot to attach to him. But I think if you truly look at value and production and impact, Judge is head and shoulders the better player.
All right, I do have to ask you this because you're dropping all these sabermetric numbers. I know you get this question all the time, but let's ask it on the podcast. What would you study in college if you wanted to be a general manager? I say that because, I look at Chaim Bloom, just took over the Cardinals. He was a Latin major at Yale.
Yeah. I was a psychology major.
Okay.
At Michigan. Yeah, I went to Michigan. I was a psychology major. And that's not a bad degree to get because,
it's relationships,
you're dealing with people who are nuts. So it helps to have that. And sometimes you're nuts.
If you're dealing with Bobby V, it's got to help, right?
No, he was honestly.
No, Bobby V's good.
He probably needed it for me more than anything. But I think that I think a math background is certainly part of it, but there's a lot of ways to get into it. And, so I was fortunate because I had played 7 years in the minor league. So I had the playing background, but I was also an academic. I was a really good student, went to Michigan, had 3.9 GPA there. I was second in my class. So I had kind of both of those. And so where the numbers meant something to me, but so did what my eyes told me. And so I think that, some statistical, mathematical background can help. I think management backgrounds can help. I think that as much as possible, while developing the whole person, really networking and getting into evaluating talent and sharing it with people, be willing to be wrong on players. And, I remember being in a meeting as an administrative assistant for minor leagues and scouting. And I'm in a meeting and we're talking about, should we trade Greg Jeffries and Kevin McReynolds, and we're going to David Cohn, we're going to get Saberhagen in the deal and this whole big thing. And I'm in the meeting and I raise my hand and they're like, Steve, you don't have to raise your hand. I'm like, all right, okay. And I said, all I know is I played with Greg Jeffries. He's the best hitter I've ever seen. I said, I've never seen anybody like it. And so I would say that I would hold on to him. And so, but I was willing to speak up to Frank Cashin, who's, an executive of the year, won World Series and everything else, because I thought, that's my opinion. I might be wrong, but I want to at least share it. And you've got to be bold to get out there, network, and really just find somebody that will help sponsor you in finding an opportunity somewhere.
It's so amazing how this game has changed, the relationships and all the rest. And you look at all these managers that are looking, and people keep asking me for Bret, would Bret make a good manager? I think, yeah, for the right ball club, I think he'd make a great manager. And there's others that will be more analytic and the way these manager jobs go. It's interesting that you kind of described it, that has to have that piece that fits between the general manager and the skipper. So if Bret ever found someone, he'd have to find someone who's more like him temperament or the yin to his yang.
Yeah, I think that's right. And look, there's no, like, having been in broadcasting and sit down before games to talk to managers, it's amazing how different they are. It's amazing. And some of them I talked to, I'm thinking, how did he get hired in the interview? And some of them I'm like, oh, I get it. Like, he's got his T's crossed, his I's dotted, right angles, everything's here, everything's dotted and everything else. So I understand how that can come across in an interview. But when you're dealing with people, and that's the thing to remember, that a manager is managing people, not numbers. And numbers are really important, and I think it's critical. And there was a day, I think, when Paul DePodesta back, when he was with the Dodgers, said if I can't quantify it, then it doesn't matter. Talking about makeup and character and how it fits into a team, and I'm like, no, I think that does really matter. But so too do the numbers. And I think that the hybrid approach for me is the best way to go with it, and understand that there are all kinds of personalities that can fit. And if you've had a loosey-goosey manager, we all sort of then go to the more strict, accountable manager. If we had the strict, accountable guy, we need somebody that isn't as rigid, that lets the players play more. We always look for something different when we're going through it. And there's a lot of great managers in the game right now. And this next round, we've got 8 openings. There will be some others that will be guys who have been managing before who step in and get jobs and have learned, like AJ Hinch did when he learned back in the day. Like what a manager he is right now, one of the best in the game. That I expect David Ross to be really good whatever next job he gets somewhere. And Derek Shelton and Rocco Baldelli will all take things that they learn and apply them in a way, and then adapt and adjust to things that they realize, maybe I should have done this a little bit differently in the past.
Do you think people are going to look at Boone?
I think there's a shot. I think that the family aspect of it and the job that Aaron's done would certainly, I think, give Bret a real look at it. I mean, it's a baseball family. He's a baseball lifer. And, you know, in my mind, he's kind of from the Ron Washington mold of high energy and emotion and let's go, and a little more motivational than maybe some of the other managers who are out there in the game. And there's a way to blend that with analytics on a staff and in understanding. And look, Bret knows that too in all of it. So, but yeah, I think it's going to come to the right fit for the right front office to see how it fits for them.
You know, it's interesting when you're talking about what Depot had said, and I worked with Paul in Oakland about not being able to quantify that, but you look at some of the most successful managers. You talked about Tito, right? It's all about the personality, the EQ. Dusty Baker is going to ride that into the Hall of Fame. So will Bruce Bochy. And you talk about people that want to be around people like Tito, like Dusty, like Boch.
Right, because they create a sense of love. And when they do, like Dusty does, if Terry Francona does, like they give you the feeling, not the impression, but the reality is that they love you and respect you and appreciate you, so that when they confront something or hold you accountable for it, you understand that it's in everybody's best interest. They're not doing it to demean you in some way. And I think that I believe that the more even keel has a longer shelf span. That if you need a fixer, you can bring the high energy guy in. But at some point, you need to keep giving more to get the same result. That you got to be even more in people's faces to get the same result. At some point, you lose them. That's why I think the more even keel approach is the better way to go. But you also have to hold people accountable, be respectful, do it in a way that's private, that you don't call them out and embarrass anybody in public. And, you know, I think that for me, I look at the Joe Torres. Like Bobby Cox was a fiery guy, but his players looked at him like he was their grandfather and they loved him. And he was his players' biggest fan, like supporter. Like players said I could be 0 for 15. He makes me feel like I got 10 hits in a row. And, you know, Terry Francona is that way. Like he makes you feel so good about yourself. And so, yeah, I think that there's a lot of good guys out there. Pat Murphy's so fun, right? Craig Counsell, excellent manager. Bruce Bochy, you know, there's no doubt who's in charge, but there's no question how much he loves his players. And I think that style for me, Dave Roberts is that way. And so we see a lot of that with these teams that are in the playoffs right now.
See, the reason we want Bret to get the job, though, Steve, is then we can give him crap again. Because when he got the hitting coach job in Texas, they said the headlines were either podcaster gets job, as if that's all he's ever done, or Aaron's brother gets a job, and it just got under his skin.
Yeah,
and I made sure I reminded those headlines that, oh yeah, what's your qualification? You're a podcaster, Boone.
Yeah, it's so funny, and yet, you know, it doesn't matter what they start out saying. Just go out and win, and when you do that, they'll start saying better things.
Absolutely. Steve, I appreciate you coming on the podcast. It's been fun catching up with you. Really appreciate, like I said, coming on with us. I think we learned a bunch of stuff about the general manager. And thank you for asking that question about what it's like to be in that executive suite, because I think we take it for granted that there's a bunch of pointy-headed Poindexters in there with computers. No, those guys live and breathe the game just as much as the rest of us. We just don't see them on the screen that much.
Right. Yeah, for sure. For sure. Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Hey, that's going to do it for the Boone Podcast for this week. Thanks, everybody.